All right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Let's see who's got first blood. I'm looking for you guys. I'm looking for you. Um. All right. So this morning, y'all, I got a show for you. We're gonna have a good old time. So let's kick it off. We're gonna talk. I mean, the debates are tonight. We're gonna kind of preview what to expect and let's do it. Let's kick it off. All right. Y'all saw what happened there. I got it switched over to the right chat and everything was rocking and rolling. And I was waiting for the chat to load up and I just knew it was going to load up. And I started making jokes about who's going to have first blood. And then I gave up because there was nobody there. And then Fish and Golf popped up with first blood right before I hit the switch over button. And y'all, I'll tell you something. This show this morning, I tried to overproduce a little bit, do a little extra something something. So I got started around 4:30 this morning. Well, no, I got started around 3 this morning. Spent some time reading some stuff and doing some research. Then around 4:30, I started working on presentation, right? And what I did after that, starting at about 4:30 for the next 2 hours, I was looking at different AI platforms that convert data sets into graphic visual charts. And frankly, what happened, I went through about 10 or 12 of them. And frankly, at the end of the day, I chose not to go with any of them because after 2 hours of playing with them, I decided that while they were all quite good, and for the most part, the ones that I preferred over others, it was less about how they handled the data and more about the final visual appeal of the product. But in each case, what I discovered is even though they're AI and they're kind of on autopilot once you put the data in, it, or give it the parameters for the data to find, how you make that request is one of those kind of touchy things for a large language model product. And after about 2 hours of playing with it, I decided, this is not something that I can learn sufficiently to make it useful for this morning. But I learned enough about several of them that I believe we'll be able to make good use of them in the future. And so instead of the more polished data viz that I wanted to use this morning, I've just got a couple of charts pulled up. It's less data than I wanted to be able to cover, but here's the argument that I want to make. It is not an uncommonly held opinion that Donald Trump is the best president since Ronald Reagan, if not in U.S. history. That is not an opinion that I hold all by me onesie. Many have made very compelling arguments to that point. And then you've got Joe Biden. Now, I will actually argue that it's difficult to say that Biden is the worst president in history, for several reasons. But Jimmy Carter, who's probably going to die today so that they can postpone the debate because Biden is not ready for this. But yeah, they're probably going to go ahead and pull Jimmy's plug today because, well, they just can't afford to have Biden shit himself while Donald Trump asks him about Hunter's laptop and gun felonies, right? But anyway, old Jimmy Carter quipped within around the end of the first year of the current administration that he said he loves Joe Biden. He said he absolutely loves Joe Biden because finally he doesn't have to be the worst president in history anymore. It was Jimmy Carter. And that's hilarious. Now, let me lay out the case. Let me lay out the case that Biden is not the worst president. I will concede absolutely that Biden is a much worse president than Jimmy Carter. Carter was bad, but frankly, Carter was bad largely because he was just ineffective. He was so ineffective that his inefficacy had disastrous, especially economic consequences. As a result of Carter's disastrously ineffective presidency, we saw the highest interest rates and psychotic high mortgage rates. People in the 80s had between 12 and 20% interest rates on their frickin' home mortgages. That's, y'all, people are freaking out right now at 9%. It didn't take everybody long to get used to those 2 and 3% rates that we had for a little while under Trump, right? Everybody got used to that like it was the new normal, and it's a good indicator as well. But we'll get back to that in a moment. That's a piece of the other argument. But Biden, I can say, in all fairness, is not the worst president, because you have to remember that prior to Biden, there was Obama, there was Johnson, and there was Wilson. Now, it's difficult to argue which of those three was worse, largely because the direct impact of Obama's specific policies were acute and disastrous, right? Obamacare spiked the cost of health care and health insurance. And let me I want to be careful not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but this is something that people don't understand, and it's important to understand, because you have been intentionally misinformed and confused on the language, right? And that was part of the political maneuvering required to get Obamacare into place. But this is important to understand. Health insurance and health care are two completely separate industries. And they are not even related. They are connected, not related. That's an important distinction, right? Car manufacturers, manufacturing companies that produce personal automobiles, and public transportation manufacturing companies, those companies are related. They produce something that is similar, and as a result, their suppliers, their contractors, and their various communications and manufacturing and logistics chains have a lot of common crossover, right? Whereas health insurance is a product, an ephemeral intellectual property type product, which is related to the acquisition of your health care, but does not itself actually affect your health care. Outside of the argument about whether or not the particular coverage you have covers XYZ medical procedure, the insurance you have and the health care you have access to are only connected by the coverage decisions made by that insurance company. So, damn, Tom Waller, brother. I hope you just flew back from Iraq. I bet you had a layover at Hartsfield somewhere, brother. You should have called me. I'd have bought you a beer. But welcome home. Good to have you back. And yeah, let's get back into it. So, like I said, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but it's important that you understand that health insurance and health care are two different businesses. But Obama's policy maneuvers, political maneuvers, and direct impact were acute. They had immediate, disastrous, negative consequences. And of course, by examining the track record, as we've discussed many times on this show before, you can consider it against Hamlin's razor, which is the proposition that you must not attribute to malice that which can be explained by incompetence. But when you look at policy maneuvers like Obamacare, where the negative outcome was obvious, predictable, and clearly predicted and stated beforehand, right? You had one group, the conservatives, who said this will have these disastrous negative consequences. And the other side, the communists, the Democrats, who said, no, it won't have those consequences. And then the bill is passed, the program is put into place, and lo and behold, yes, it had precisely those negative consequences. Wherein the economic relationship between health insurance, and health care increased insurance costs, insurance premium rates by over 400%, almost overnight, and increased the cost of health care, the raw cost of health care, to the individual payor. That would be the insurance companies, the uninsured personally, and the government most significantly. And when I say the government most significantly, like with college loans, once the government got itself into the business of paying healthcare costs, the doctors, or more correctly, the administrators, the healthcare administrators, looked at the situation and they said, hey, this is government spending money. That means that the guy writing the check is spending somebody else's money. He's spending your money. Specifically, he's spending your money. And like Milton Friedman always loved to say, no one is ever as careful with someone else's money as he is with his own. Like that is the principal problem with government, is that no one is ever as careful with someone else's money as they are with their own. Right? You go sit down at the Red Lobster and ask them for that rock lobster, and they say it's market price, and you go, oh, well, okay, so what's the market price today? Oh, well, it's $150 for that one lobster. And you say, Jesus, is it like El Salvador de los Crustaceones? And she says, well, it comes with a potato. Oh, Lord! That must be one magic fucking spud. Anyway, I'm not going to spend $150 on one lobster. I've seen me not do it. But if I'm out to dinner on the company dime, that might be another matter. Even me. So, Friedman's right. Nobody spends someone else's, no one spends their own money as carefully. No one spends someone else's money as carefully as they spend their own, right? You will try not to waste your own money. So that's Obama. Acute problem now. But then you go back to Johnson, LBJ, Mr. Swingin' Johnson, the hot tub king. He gave us the Great Society. And an interesting statistic related to the Great Society is that the U.S. national debt, until I think about 3 or 4 years ago, basically until right after Biden took office, the U.S. national debt was almost penny for penny equal to the cost of the Great Society welfare programs since their inception. Understand what I'm saying to you. If it weren't for the Great Society and its welfare programs, and before you get too up in arms over this, keep in mind that the food stamp system, the food stamp program, what they now call the SNAP program, is administered through the Department of Agriculture and is the remnant or the evolution of a separate non-welfare state program that predates the Great Society by 60 or 70 years. Right? The food stamp program that we have today came out of a Department of Agriculture program where prior to the ready availability of residential refrigeration systems, we had a problem with people in cities starving because they're of a problem with access to food, and the access problem hinged on a bottleneck in transportation logistics, where it cost money for to get the train to take the food from the farm into the city, and the farmers didn't have the money to pay for the train, to hire the train, because in order to have the money to hire the train, they needed to sell the vegetables and the livestock and everything. They needed to sell all of the farm produce and food that had to get to the city to be sold. So they couldn't get their product to market. So they couldn't make the money to move the product to the market without moving the product to the market. And the government stepped in. It was probably that the origination of the food stamp program is probably the single most useful thing that the government ever did before it was corrupted into what we now have as a welfare state program, because you would buy the stamps, you would have your stamps in hand to prove that you had already paid for your food. That would pay for the transportation, pay the farmers, get the food into the city, and then you go pick up your food and buy your next book of stamps. Right? That was actually a very clever solution to a serious problem. And Waller says, people in cities starving? People in cities enjoy starving. You know what, Waller? As of today, I'd be happy to let them do it. And I would put to you that the correct solution to every problem that happens in a city is to move to where the happy is, which is the middle of nowhere. Anyway, so, but LBJ's Great Society essentially created the national debt that we have today, is almost single-handedly responsible for our current national debt. Now, that is a problem that occurred chronically over time. So it makes it difficult between the disastrous but acute nature of Barack Obama's just cataclysmically bad presidency and the over time very serious problem but slow, steady, chronic problem of LBJ's Great Society. It's difficult to argue the significance of the disaster done the disaster caused by those two presidents. But then you back it up to Woodrow Wilson, and you get the creation of the Fed, the IRS, and the federal income tax. Without any of the three of which Obama could not have had his disastrous results, and LBJ could not have had his disastrous results. See, Obama and LBJ would have been hamstrung in their disastrous attempts to turn this nation into a second Soviet socialist republic. They wouldn't have been able to do it. In fact, I would go so far as to say that neither of them would have been able to get elected, because both were elected on basically the promise to pay you in arrears for your vote with taxpayer dollars. And neither of them would have been able to do that if it hadn't been for Wilson, the Fed, the IRS, and the federal income tax. So, while it is difficult to say that Biden is the worst president ever, he's certainly the worst president in living memory. I don't know. That's right. Mom and Dad are watching. Y'all generally remember LBJ. I don't know how much attention you were paying at the time, but he was trash. Right? Need I say more? Sergeant Major points out Biden is paying for votes in advance. Not only is that true, he's doing it nakedly, transparently, and in blatant and direct violation of explicit orders, more than one explicit order from the Supreme Court, clearly detailing his absolute, not just lack of authority, but the total prohibition on such an authority as laid out in the Constitution. Because it's at its very simplest, the fact is that what Joe Biden is doing is he is exercising as the chief executive officer of the executive branch. He is exercising the authority over the purse strings, which are the sole originating authority of the House of Representatives in the legislative branch. That is a clear violation of the separation of powers and a clear usurpation of the individual authorities ceded to each of the three co-equal branches under the Constitution. It is all, Joe Biden forgiving student debts is all by itself nearly a total dissolution of the co-equal branches' separation of power and checks and balances. Essentially, by paying for those student loans the way that he has abolished the government and replaced it with a personal oligarchy. That is not hyperbole. Right? This isn't like when I was talking about Ahmaud Arbery being the beginning of the abolition of the justice system for everyone but white men, where I thought I was speaking hyperbolically to make a terrifying point, and it turned out I was righter than I could have ever feared I might be. No. This is an explicit statement of fact. I'm not making an argument that Joe Biden has effectively abolished the government. I'm making it as a clear fact statement. And I would love to entertain any argument to the contrary. In fact, I would find that entertaining. But while it's easy to argue that Joe Biden, who has given us some of the highest gas prices in history, nearly, not quite. There have been brief spikes. We had one brief spike under Barack Obama, I believe. Let me see. Is this gas price? That's unemployment. That is inflation. Oh no, I'm wrong. Biden, in fact, holds the record at $3.95 in 2002. I'm sorry, in 2022. In 2022, Joe Biden hit the record with a national average of $3.95. The previous record was under Barack Obama at $3.62. That was mid 2012. And let's see, 2008 was the previous high before that at 325. And let me give you a little insight on how those numbers work. In 2008, let me see, is that correct? Yeah, in 2008, I was doing a Diddy move for a PCS. So I had a permanent change of station orders to move from the Presidio Monterey in California to Goodfellow Air Force Base in East Texas. I did a Diddy move, which means I packed all my shit up in my own pick-em-up truck and drove across the country instead of hiring movers, because you get paid to do it that way, and I thought it'd be fun to make the long drive. It was. By the way, it was fun. But I made that long drive, and right smack in the middle of that drive, so it cost me about $4 a gallon, just a little less than $4 a gallon in California to fill up the truck. And then on the way out of California, like, you basically can't leave California without driving over a mountain range. So to get from Monterey to Goodfellow, I basically drove to LA and turned left. Right? And I went over the mountain. And as I got to the top of that mountain with my truck packed up like the Clampets, I pulled into a gas station with my dummy light on at the top of the mountain, and it was $10 a gallon for gas. So I put 20 in the tank and bought a cheeseburger, kicked in my clutch, and rolled into Arizona. And as soon as I crossed the state line, it was $1.15, and I filled her up. Right? That was 2008. And I, like I said, just to put the numbers in perspective, right? Because it says the national average, right? The national average that year was $3.25 a gallon. And, Maul points out, Maul mentions when Katrina hit, that was 05. So in 05, when Katrina hit, we jumped from 185 to 227. Surprisingly, right after 9/11, we actually went down a few cents nationally. And if y'all, for those of you who remember, right before 9/11, we had, like, the national average before 9/11, this says it was $1.42. Here in Georgia, which usually has some of the lowest gas prices in the nation, here in Georgia, right before 9/11, we were paying between 85 and 95 cents a gallon. And I remember when the towers went down, I went and immediately filled up my my van. And of course, all the doomsayers on the news were warning that because of the towers going down and what it would mean for Middle East relations, et cetera, that we should expect to see $4 a gallon national average by the beginning of the following week. And we saw it very briefly, but that was mostly a function of price gouging, less than a function of supply and demand. So now let me make this argument. Biden has left the country by almost every metric. He is hopefully about to leave office, and he's going to leave office by almost every metric, having left the country in worse shape than it was before he entered office. Right? Now, when I say that, I say that advisedly, right? But That is also true of almost every president, period. Now, in fairness to every president, the fact is this: inflation is a thing. And, back to Woodrow Wilson for a second, that's because we have the Fed. All inflation occurs at the printing press. If you switch off the printing press, inflation stops. Period. That's it. Switch off the printing press, inflation stops. It instantly goes from whatever it is to zero. It really is that simple. So, in fairness to all the presidents before, inflation and the mistakes that they made, which contributed to inflation, is a major factor in the numbers that we're about to discuss. And I apologize for only having these three particular graphs pulled up. I wanted to show a lot more metrics, but you'll understand the trend as I show it to you. Right, we'll go back to gas prices. Let me see, I'm gonna blow this up so I can see what you're seeing. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can blow that up a bit more, see it better. There. Okay, so looking at gas prices, right? You got, 94. That's when no, 92. Okay. Back to 92. So Clinton was inaugurated in 93. Right? So 93 national average $1.07. Right? Now, Bush the former actually shows us a little dip here, right? So, good for him. But for Clinton, you go from him entering office to, oh, hold on a minute. Dragon Slayer from Twitch just dropped an OnlyFans link. That's a banhammer offense. Y'all, free speech, I'll let you say whatever you want, but you're not selling shit. You're not selling shit on my show. Not unless you pay me to do it. And even then, no OnlyFans. Oh, so Clinton left office. Gas was almost 50 cents higher national average, right? Then you get the next Bush. He leaves office. So Obama was elected in 08, inaugurated in 09. You got nearly a full dollar bump, right? Obama takes office, 235. He leaves office, 242. So, in all fairness to Obama, the difference between when he took office and when he left office is a much narrower window than for Bush. But let's not forget, for most of Obama's presidency, gas was over $3 a gallon. For the majority of his presidency, gas was over $3 a gallon. In fact, for most of his presidency, it was nearly what it is today, just a little bit lower. But then you've got the Donald. Trump comes in, there's a little bit of a spike during the Afghan surge, right? And there's only about 3 cents difference between when he came into office and when he left office. And those numbers seem a little, but even then, at 272, he whooped both of his predecessors' asses at 272 being his highest watermark. But then you've got the inauguration of, now that's 301. That's for the year of 2021. So you've really got Trump finishing it with 217. And then in record time, Joe Biden's got us at the highest gas price in history at 395. And I would be amazed if he could get it below, if he could get it even down to 217 before November. I mean, that would be like, you know, we would have to look at that the same way we looked at Obama's unemployment numbers, right? So by the gas, my point here though is by the gas price metric, every president has left the country worse than he found it. Trump only by 3 cents. That's easily explained by inflation, right? But a full nearly $2 under Biden in less than 2 years, well, in a year, that cannot be explained away by inflation, especially not a mere 9% inflation. So, oh, by the way, let's take a look at the inflation rates, right? And by the numbers, everybody, you know, again, everybody leaves it worse than they found it. To his credit, Obama actually showed us inflation numbers below 2% for the majority of his presidency. Now, we say that, and as you can see, Trump did even better through his entire presidency, right? Obama's high was 4%. The highest under Trump was right basically on his, as of his inauguration. He peaked and then he stayed 2 and under for the rest of it. And Sergeant Major's comment here, the only way gas prices drop that much is for other countries to dump oil to drive down prices and hurt Trump, and that would not surprise me in the least. Clearly. Now, but then of course you look at Biden, and the reporting says that at its highest it was 9.1, right? And it's hard to click on that little tip, but it's that says 9.1. And we're expected to believe that an interest rate of 9.1 can explain a doubling for gas prices, near quadrupling for energy prices, 200% and 300% increases in your consumables, your grocery prices, etc. Right? Everything that you spend money on is twice as expensive today as it was when Joe Biden was inaugurated. And a great deal of that fact is owed explicitly and directly to Biden's suspension of the XL Keystone pipeline. Now, let's talk unemployment for a minute, right? Obama showed us these numbers, and if you remember, he blamed this, his 9% unemployment. And let's not forget, back when we were seeing those 9% unemployment numbers for Obama, there were a lot of metrics coming out showing how they changed the way they calculated unemployment numbers. They stopped calculating, they started separating the basic the basic unemployment number into 2 separate numbers, which were the unemployed and the, what did they call them? The people who were no longer participating. So they, before Obama, we counted everybody who was unemployed, everybody who was between a certain, I'm not sure if the age is 15 and 65 or 18 and 65 or whatever, but basically between the age of employability and the age of expected retirement. So we used to count everybody in that bracket as employed or unemployed for the unemployment numbers. And then when Obama was in office, they changed it to only the market participation. So people who had stopped actively seeking employment were no longer counted. And that's how they got the number down from somewhere in the mid 20% to around 9%. And then, of course, the October surprise, one of the October surprises right before Obama's reelection, was that just magically overnight, the unemployment rate dropped down below 8% by a fraction. Because, of course, it was, they kept saying that no president has ever been reelected with an unemployment rate of 8%, like the 9% rate that we were looking at the 8% rate that we were looking at under Carter when Reagan whooped his ass, right? But then, I'm sure you've all seen the ads. Oh, the Biden administration understands that a college degree isn't necessary for a good paying job. That's why the Biden administration, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. Is that right? Because let's take a peek here. You got this giant spike here. That spike is 1 month. That huge spike represents 1 month. Unemployment, and this is under Donald Trump, hit like 14%, almost 15%, even by the weird new metric. But you'll see, there it is, 14.7%. But that's the month of April, which, as you all recall, was the 15 days to slow the spread that turned into a year. Right? And as you'll notice, it was just April. And then people opened their businesses back up, and it almost immediately dropped. So by the time you're getting into Biden's inauguration, you're already looking at a dramatic drop from that 14 to 6, right? Now, if everything is the previous administration's fault, then the 4.7% that we saw in September of 2021, that just has to belong to Donald Trump. Now, this chart only goes to the end of 2023 or the middle of 20. Oh no, it goes all the way up to February of this year at 3.9. So Trump came into office looking at that's January 16. Looking at 4.7 in January 2017 when he was inaugurated. And he left office looking at that little bump up to 6. So the major metric here, right, like I said, almost every president has left office in almost every metric worse than he found it. Trump had COVID, where basically every Democrat governor and mayor that was in office at the time just shut it down. And you'll recall they were screaming that the president needed to shut down everything. And he said, I can't do that. I don't have that authority. That's a decision that has to be made by governors and mayors. And of course, if he had done it, then we would have expected, nobody would have been surprised to hear all of his detractors. Oh, he's a dictator. He's exceeding his constitutional authority, right? That you can't win for losing with these pieces of shit. But the 15 days to slow the spread gave us that huge bump up to 14. And by the time Trump left office, even despite that, He was only up by about a little better than 0.5% from where he found the country. And by the way, before all that happened, he had managed to carry us from that those high fours to right before COVID hit for 3.6. Now below four is what they refer to as statistically zero in unemployment. When you're below 4% unemployment, that is effectively zero unemployment. Obviously there's still unemployment that exists at that level, but you're talking about essentially at that point you're talking about the chronically unemployed and unemployable. Because once you get out of the 4%, you're getting into the crossover between between those people who are collecting welfare while working and those people who are collecting welfare and not working. So, under 4% statistically zero is it's not statistically is not the word I'm looking for. Not essentially, effectively, basically. And Pitt Danny points out, if one person delivers food for 3 companies, that counts as 3 jobs. Yeah. Right now, and I won't air too much of his business, but I've mentioned that one of the reasons that Cameron's not on the show as much lately, at all lately, really, is because the boy is just working himself to death. He's working 3 jobs right now. He's on the road at 3 o'clock in the morning on the way to one job, and he's putting in ludicrous amounts of hours, and he counts all by himself. He counts for 3 jobs. You know, Cameron is basically 1% of the employment contribution to the country. But yeah, that's a very good point, Danny. That's another piece of the data map that makes that information very difficult to examine. But yeah, going into if we're being fair, you look at 2020 as such an anomalous year that the metrics should really be considered from the end of 2019. And the fact is, Donald Trump is the only president in history to leave the country better than he found it. Even taking the metrics from when he actually left office at the beginning of 2021, even those metrics where the country was slightly worse, it was less worse than any president by comparison in history, especially within the last 50 years of history for these presidents. Those metrics are very difficult to argue with, especially when you take that comparison and that data and you go and you look at Biden's record, whereby every single one of those metrics, the disastrous difference between the state that Biden found the country in and the state that it is in currently exceeds the worst disastrous damage done by any president in my lifetime. In my lifetime. Right? I'm not a sweet summer child here. So, the debate tonight will be between, as I've just laid out a solid argument for, the best president and, let's say, the 4th worst. One of the worst presidents in history. If that were not enough, the fact is that our government, which has been obviously severely and deeply corrupted and is in clear, active collusion with the media, especially organizations like CNN, which is who's running the debate tonight. The rules on the debate tonight go as follows. Try and keep up with this psychopathy. The debate, the two candidates will be remote, so they'll be calling in on a video chat. There will be no audience. Oh, actually, no, I take it back. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the video chat thing. I think they're both coming to Atlanta, Georgia for the I could be wrong. CNN's hosting. I'm actually not sure if both candidates are going to be here or not. But that's irrelevant to the point. There's no studio audience. That's an important factor. And I'll get to that in a second. The moderators are both wholly in the tank for Joe Biden. Now, when I say both wholly in the tank, we've got Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Now, Dana Bash is the ex-wife of, I forget his name now, but he was a big mucky muck in the Obama administration. And I forget what his title was now, but he was a big deal there. There's an obvious direct and incestuous connection between Dana Bash and the Biden-Obama regime. And then, of course, you've got Jake Tapper, who, quite separately from just being a Democrat national machine shill, is one of those people who has spent the last decade essentially just saying Trump's a Nazi, Trump is Hitler, over and over and over again. He's made that comparison repeatedly. This truth is so cutting that when Trump's press spokeswoman went on a CNN interview just a few days ago and attempted to say the words, Jake Tapper has repeatedly called Donald Trump Hitler, they cut her off and just dropped her from the segment. So we're looking at, Pitt Danny points out, Bash was one of the 52 that said the laptop was from Russia. And yes, let's be clear about this. The 52 so-called intelligence community officials, who, by the way, were all, in fact, intelligence community officials, who said that the laptop was from Russia. That statement was made at least 1 year after the FBI had the laptop in its possession and it had been absolutely verified to authenticated as Hunter Biden's personal laptop containing significant inculpatory evidence of serious crimes committed by Hunter Biden and in connection with a long list of current serving Democrat and a few Republican politicians, elected officials, right? There's a contact list in there. Essentially an exposition on the collusion between the individual senators, representatives, and similar elected officials of the United States who are basically bought and paid for by either or, and in some cases, and China and Russia. So those 52 men and women, I don't know how much force of law the document that they sent carries, but they lied. It may not be fair to say that they perjured themselves, but they lied, and they did it knowingly and intentionally when they issued that letter. Anyway, so you got that. Then you got the rules. The two candidates' microphones will be muted until it is their time to speak, and the moderators have the switch to mute the individual candidates' microphones. And then, of course, the significance of the absence of a studio audience is they can run this debate on a. I'm not saying they're going to, but it's troubling that we will never know if they did. The debate can run on a delay. It could run on. Danny says they should lose their security. If I had my way, those 52 would be hanged, or toastered or bed sheeted, because what they did was they conducted a coup against a lawfully elected president. They were engaged in the conduct of a coup against the United States of America that was conducted by the CIA at a minimum, and the entirety of the intelligence community at a more probable level. I mean, the level of corruption we saw there is almost inexplicable. But back to the audience thing. Without the live studio audience, without the live audience at the debate, it is possible for CNN to run the entire thing on a delay, which would allow them the ability to edit the conversation essentially in real time, and you would not even know. So if we make it through the entire debate tonight without a Batacaf care or a Truman and shower to pressure, or my butt's been wiped, if we make it through the whole debate tonight without one of those, pennies to pesos, they were live editing the debate as it happened. And that's a major risk there. Obviously, we all need to be watching out for the Candy Crowley moment that's almost certain to happen tonight. I remember back in the debate between Romney and Obama, Romney was making a particular point, and Candy Crowley swooped in and interrupted him and corrected his statement, made a fact check correction on the statement, which is not something that a debate moderator should ever do. That fact checking or counter arguing the point made by one debater is the sole province of the other debater in a debate of any kind. If you are the moderator, your job is simply to supply the questions, supply the topics, the propositions, and then enforce whatever rules have been agreed to, like the individual time limits on the length of speech, to get them back under control if they start just screaming and unproductively cursing and yelling at each other, etc., etc., etc. So we need to be on the lookout for that Candy Crowley moment. But essentially, the entire thing is quite clearly and obviously stacked against Donald Trump. I'm gonna watch it tonight. Like I said, I will not be trying to do a live stream, because quite simply, there's just too many giant channels doing the same thing at the same time. But depending on how I'm feeling after the debate and how the debate went and whether or not I found anything worth discussing, I may or may not go live this evening for a little bit after the debate. Oh, excuse me. But that's where I want to leave this. I think I made a pretty well reasoned argument that Donald Trump and Joe Biden represent not just opposite ends of the political spectrum and the extreme edges of the Overton window, but actually represent the extremes of quality in a chief executive officer. And I made that, and you know what? Funnily enough, I made that argument without even talking about the world peace angle. So, just to summarize, Donald Trump, right? Let's not forget, he ended ISIS. He crossed the demilitarized zone and shook hands with Kim Jong-un. He is the first president and the last president in 30 years to enjoy an administration in which Russia did not invade and take over another country. Right? Donald Trump is the only president since either Bush Sr. or Ronald Reagan under whom Russia did not take land. And he got the Abraham Accords up and running, almost up and running. Right? So Donald Trump represented cheap gas, good jobs, world peace. Excuse me. Under Joe Biden, we have seen record-breaking inflation. Record-breaking inflation. Gas prices so high that people have had to quit their jobs and take lower wages just to afford to commute. Interest rate increases so high that if you're under 40 years old right now, there is an incredibly high probability that you are complaining on TikTok that you'll never be able to own a home. And let me remind you, everything I'm listing right now can be directly attributed to one of the very first actions that Biden took coming into office, which was to shut down the XL Keystone pipeline and shift the money, the investment from that oil pipeline, which was a part of the American Energy Independence Plan, over to the I forget the name of the German pipeline, but essentially what happened is Biden came into office and he took the investment in American energy independence that was building the Keystone XL pipeline, and he sent that money to build a similar pipeline in Eastern Europe, essentially funding Russia to begin the invasion of Ukraine, which was a predictable outcome. We discussed it on this show. We predicted it on this show. When he said he was going to make the maneuver, we said, this is what's going to happen. And lo and behold, there it went. It was predictable because we could see so clearly that Volodymyr Zelensky is essentially a puppet, right? We're talking about a man who was elected to the presidency based on his having played in a comedy the president of the country to which he was elected, right? You know, I mean, Donald Trump is a media personality, but businessman first and foremost, and a very wealthy one, a very successful and talented one. Volodymyr Zelensky plays the piano with his penis. Volodymyr Zelensky was elected to lead Ukraine because he doesn't care if 20% of all the money sent by the Americans to the Ukraine disappears into fly-by-night, brand new startup, quote, security contractors. He doesn't care if 20% of the money sent to support the Ukrainian war effort just vanishes He's happy to be your laundromat. That's why he's there. And then he tried to play both sides with joining NATO or the UN, with joining NATO. And, you know, I hate to speak in defense of Putin, but essentially, I mean, NATO and the UN essentially are enemies of Russia. They each, and not directly, they're not in active conflict, but each does in fact represent a national security concern to a country like Russia. And when you're talking about a border country, which essentially defected from your country, just a few dozen years ago, that is something that is of concern, right? Imagine this: Xi Jinping sends an invading force to take command and control of Mexico. I'm sorry. We might have some concerns about that. We might have some very serious concerns about that. So, the debate tonight is between cheap gas, world peace, or the guy that gave you the Afghanistan withdrawal. The guy that priced you out of house and home. The guy that took away your vacations because you can't afford to drive to the beach. Cheap gas and world peace, or World War III. Those are your choices. So, y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. Tomorrow, we'll be back with Firearms Friday. First thing in the morning before I head out to the farm to go swimming because my fat ass needs to get out of this hot. Y'all, it's been 100 degrees. It's been hot. It's been hot. So, y'all be safe. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.